Traditionally speaking, I'm not someone who typically enjoys shoot-'em-up games. I generally find the genre to be pretty uninventive, oversaturated, and flush with artificial difficulty to drink down coins in arcades. Touhou 7, Perfect Cherry Blossom, is a bullet hell style shoot-'em-up that prides itself in its musical artistry and prolific difficulty. However, where it strives with excellence in certain areas as a bullet hell, it falls a bit short in other areas as a result. Perfect Cherry Blossom is anything but, really. And while Touhou 7 might not be a perfect video game, or even a perfect shoot-'em-up, it is still the best goddamn rhythm game I have ever had the misfortune of playing. The first level in the game is a textbook example of what it means to make a good first impression. The setting is beautiful despite the simple graphics. The music does an excellent job of filling in the blanks for your imagination and aptly sets the scene. The playing field is clear and open. Enemies are slow-moving, easy to kill, and have simple attacks which are easily avoided. It's only the first level, and it's here to set a precedent. The first enemy you could call even remotely challenging, the stage mini-boss, is none other than Cerno, the strongest ice fairy. Probably. She serves as a sample, a taste of what is to come, a preview of what you might expect from bosses further down the line. She puts a lot of projectiles on the screen, all of which are slow-moving and easily evaded, since all you really have to do is just move an inch to the side and wait for them to pass you by. After you delete Cerno from reality, you spend the rest of the level picking off little entourages of fairies and collecting various power-ups. Pink cherry tiles build towards your barrier, which, once fully charged, can be activated to clear the screen of all projectiles. But it also activates if you're hit while it's present. Red power tiles make your attacks stronger, and blue score tiles build towards 1-ups, and, well, obviously add to your score. Once you've reached the end of the level, after having collected whatever you could along the way, you're faced with the first real opponent of your journey, Letty Whiterock. She's the perfect first boss, because all of her attacks are well telegraphed and slow enough for a new player to react and evade. But she has enough projectiles to keep players on their toes, and a few tricks up her sleeve to make sure any new player is feeling the pressure of their first boss encounter. She's by no means difficult, as her patterns are very easy to recognize and won't be able to catch an experienced player off guard. But she remains the perfect standard to which all future bosses should be held. Oh, and her theme's a fucking banger too. Stage 2 picks up the pace right away, as once the enemies start to appear, you'll feel a drastic difference in their potential. There are more of them, more bullets, the bullets move faster, the spread of the patterns take up much more space, and require that additional bit of precision to avoid. It's on this stage that you should reach full power, your attack now doing the most damage it can. Upon reaching full power, you'll notice that its activation absorbs all enemy projectiles in the screen, which can come in handy if applied properly with the right timing. While you're at full power, any of the red power-up drops will instead turn into pink cherry tiles. This time around, the stage mini-boss is Shen Yakumo, who leads with an outright bombarding attack of large green orbs. She'll seize control of the sky quickly and force you to play her game, as you weave yourself into the thick volley of projectiles where you're most vulnerable, having restricted options for escape. While she's still just a mini-boss, she puts up a much better fight than Cerno ever could. After you beat her, she'll drop a bomb too. Right before you reach the end of the stage, a horde of fairies will appear out of nowhere and flood the screen with bullets. This will probably kill you if you don't know it's coming. Upon reaching the end of the stage, you meet Shen once again, and this time you throw down for real. She leads with the same opening gambit, but with an additional twist this time, throwing in more projectiles which add to her pressure. She also has a few tricks up her sleeve too. She can momentarily blind you by flashing the screen a bright white, which will cause half of the projectiles on screen to shift direction, and the screen continues to shake for a moment afterwards, making precise movement more difficult. If you're not ready for it, it's very easy to accidentally sidestep into a projectile you've already avoided. Shen's style of fighting tries to keep you where she wants you while utilizing her agility to outmaneuver and outgun you. Her final spell card is an all-out attack, a flurry of bullets in every direction, some fast-moving, some slower. Shen can give even a more experienced player a run for their money, as she has the necessary tools to pressure the player into making mistakes, but once you've seen her tricks, she shouldn't prove too great a threat. Stage 3 mixes things up a bit. Unlike the first two levels, it instead opts to throw a mini-boss at you right away. Right from the very beginning, Alice is toying with you, as evidenced by the stage card which references this domain as her playground. The player's initial encounter with her introduces Alice, and keeps the player on their toes. They're in someone else's territory. The enemies of Stage 3 come in troves, firing fast-moving patterns which scatter to disrupt the player's movement. These enemies are also noticeably stronger than previous enemies, taking more hits to go down. Alice appears a second time as a mini-boss, using wildly different attacks, corralling the player into narrow boxes with lasers and fast-moving beams of bullets. Defeating her a second time awards the player a 1-up, but you're unsure of whether or not she's really gone, or when she'll next appear. Alice confronts the player for a third and final time, using everything at her disposal to prevent your passage through her play area. Sweeping salvos of multi-layered bullet spreads and lasers are just the tip of the iceberg. One of her most infamous spell cards summons dozens of fairy dolls to bombard the player from every direction, funneling them into the middle of the screen to be overwhelmed from all sides. Assuming you're new to Touhou and have likely already used a continue, she'll probably end your run here and now. But that's not all. Her final spell card is similar to Shen's, being an onslaught of projectiles at various speeds across the entire screen. But her bullets move faster, there are more of them, and there's the added threat of huge magic orbs which restrict your airspace and force you into choke points. Up until now, the player has been searching for clues as to why the season of spring has so mysteriously vanished. From the icy lake and frozen forest to the Mayohiga village, we found not a single lead. But after defeating Alice Margatroyd, that changes. The sight of a few scattered cherry blossoms fluttering through the breeze is just the lead we're looking for. And so we take to the greatest airborne heights of Gensokyo, the capital city of flowers in the sky. Stage 4, much like its familial relative, terminal cancer, is fucking cruel. Before designing this level, Zun went to his local cabaret club and slammed a line of coke off a stripper's ass and decided that he wanted to hurt people. When I hear the Stage 4 music start playing, which is really quite beautiful by the way, I feel only unrelenting anguish within the darkest depths of my soul because this stage is utterly grueling from start to finish. Not only is this level more than double the length of any other stage in the game, but the enemies are ridiculously fast, and their bullets are even faster. If you haven't memorized the spawns of every enemy and what kind of bullshit bullet spread they have, you will die. Zun does not care how many bombs you have, you will die. The stage mini-boss, Lily White, is the herald of spring itself. Her presence alone is a prime indicator that spring has come. At least, it would be, had the essence of spring not mysteriously vanished. She's a pretty cool mini-boss, using teleportation to avoid the player's attacks and thread her bullet patterns from precisely the angle she wants. Her attacks are terrifically satisfying to dodge, as they're very well telegraphed and very fair, which is quite the contrast from the normal enemies of the stage, which actually end up being more challenging than Lily. If you manage to defeat Lily, and you've already been struggling to even make it this far, you might as well just turn your computer off, because you literally do not stand a chance against the godforsaken abominations which lie in wait ahead of you. Insanely fast-moving swaths of wretchedly unfair bullet patterns smother you out of every available resource. Either you'll die before you can even blink your eyes, after you run out of spell cards, or you'll just die trying to preserve your spell cards because God knows you'll fucking need them to get through this nightmare hellscape. This level forces you to take a step back and think about how you're going to approach it the next time you manage to make it that far. This level does not teach you, it forces you to learn how to manipulate the enemies and the core fundamental elements of the game. You learn to position yourself in a way to better organize the screen and preserve valuable airspace for the next wave of enemies which are about to fly by at Mach 11. Now, say what you will, but I firmly believe that forcing a player to manipulate and break the game they're playing to even entertain the idea of succeeding is very poor design. Ideally, the player should always be working in tandem with the game, its engine, and its capabilities, not pushing back against it in order to find cracks in the code to exploit. And now, while I absolutely fucking hate this stage and everything it stands for, I can't say it isn't deserving of at least some praise. The music for this stage is nothing short of beautiful, and when you finally reach the end of it all, you're met with utter tranquility, a gentle melody and an open sky. It's peaceful, and much deserved. But good things never last, certainly not here, because now you have to fight a boss. Actually, you have to fight 3 of them. The Prism River Sisters bar entry to the Netherworld, which is exactly where our lead has taken us. They take turns assailing the player, only to unite against them as a triumvirate of musical mages. It's very appropriate that the bosses of this stage are musicians, considering the beautiful music which accompanies throughout. This shit hits dummy hard, bro. Fucking slaps. It's kind of difficult to break down the essence of this battle, because it's actually quite random. You see, after Merlin's opening gambit of winding laser beams, you face the trio's first joint spell card, after which you'll find yourself facing off against any of the 3. The progression of this battle isn't actually left to random number generation, but is instead dictated by which sister you attack the most during their spell card. Lyrica's follow-up attacks involve acutely angled claw-shaped bullet patterns which overlap and interlace with themselves as she begins to fire them more rapidly, with plenty of stray bullets to catch her movements between the gaps, later advancing to a spell card of her own with active hurt boxes which closely resemble wave-like tendrils. Lunasa's follow-up is a slow-moving spread of bullets in a star-shaped pattern. It's fairly easy to avoid, but if you've never seen the attack before, all it takes is a single mistake to cost you dearly. Her unique spell card is much more difficult, as she spawns layers of music notes all over the battlefield, each bursting into several smaller projectiles to overwhelm you. The gaps between the spread are very narrow, and you don't have a very big window to slip by. Merlin's follow-up is pretty much just Alice's swarm of lasers, but with less room for error. Her spell card calls on her twisty beams of light to summon clusters of small projectiles to approach from both sides, funneling you into the middle of the screen to be caught by her closing volley from every direction. The trio then unites once more for a grand finale, utilizing parsing lasers to displace the player and alter the path of any bullets that cross it. The final spell card is flashy more than it is difficult, resembling previous final spell cards which have taken the form of an all-out flurry of projectiles. It requires some practice, patience, and precise movement to effectively evade, but overall I'd call it a good note to end on. After having defeated the Prism River Sisters, we're able to cross the threshold into the Netherworld, land of the yokai, and finally, we're met with the best part of Stage 4, the end. Okay, now Stage 4 might have been one of the most heinous atrocities to ever dawn upon the human race, but Stage 5 is quite the opposite. The brilliant theming of this stage and beautiful soundtrack really bring it to life, and with the shrill cry of a MIDI shinobu flute, the player is once more thrust into battle. After painstakingly dodging and weaving between threaded volleys of hyper-aggressive bullet patterns, the player is offered a single moment of respite. The melodious harmonies and high-octane tempo which accompanied the exhilarating action sequences moments prior are now absent entirely. The music calms, and everything is still. Now, all that remains before you is the girl who lives after death. With a single fluid motion, the music roars back to life with a brilliant crescendo as Kanpaku draws her blade, once more putting the player to the test. The climax of this stage is not only perfectly synchronized with the gameplay itself, but the soundtrack also. In this brief encounter with Kanpaku as the stage mini-boss, she manages to communicate so much to the player. Her attacks feel chaotic, yet seemingly calculated, as if she weren't trying to kill you outright, but instead gauge your abilities for herself, and push you towards making hasty mistakes. In this fight, Kanpaku is testing you, and quite literally playing with your life, but she still manages to feel like a genuine threat too, much unlike the previous stage mini-bosses we've encountered leading up to this point.
You fool! I'm going to kill you, and then kill you again!
When we finally face Kanpaku properly at the end of the stage, she doesn't hold back. Kanpaku excels at choking you out of airspace and boasts a wide variety of skills and techniques. Everything from daggers, claws, and lasers to sweeping crescent strikes and huge arcane orbs. But her signature ability is to seemingly control the flow of time, although, personally, I don't believe her to have this ability at all. When the screen flashes a bright white and everything comes to a near standstill, I don't think that's Kanpaku interfering with the progression of time. I think it's quite literally your life flashing before your very eyes. Kanpaku's fight is easily my favorite in the entire game, and I believe it to be not only the most carefully thought out, but also the boss which was best executed. She's an honorable opponent with an actual reason to fight you, but I'll get into that later, because we haven't seen the last of her yet. Right from the get-go, Stage 6 draws you in, as the ultimate truth leaves you no quarter and no breathing room. It communicates very clearly to the player that this is the final stretch. Everything you fought through has been leading up to this. This is the beginning of the end, and this is where things get serious. player is once again met by Kanpaku, who is determined to stop them dead in their tracks. She reveals to the player that she is responsible for draining the essence of spring across all of Gensokyo, at the request of her mistress. Blinded by an unwavering sense of loyalty, she'll stop at nothing to prevent you from reaching her. Yomu's attacks are fast, but pale in comparison to what we saw in our duel at the end of Stage 5. It's clear that she's becoming quite desperate, itching to land the killing blow and protect the person dearest to her. Even her time-warping effect is absent in this fight, despite the visual flair still being present. Perhaps it's symbolic of her desperation. Regardless, Kanpaku's last stand is ultimately in vain, as we the player push even further beyond the threshold. But it's when the border of life begins to play that it dawns on you. The atmosphere grows heavy. The slow and ominous harmonies build towards this lingering air of whimsical tragedy. The ghost princess of this land is all that remains before you. This is the end. Yuyuko is entirely in control, and you are at her mercy. The tempo of this final confrontation is quick to build upon itself, ramping up relentlessly as Yuyuko's attacks grow more and more deadly. The song feels almost as though it were building upon itself endlessly, which makes the battle feel that much more grueling, as fighting Yuyuko truly is an uphill battle from start to finish. Whenever I listen to this song as the initial build-up crescendos, I can feel the lasers, the swarms of bullets, the elegant hatred resonating in my soul, like a beautiful post-traumatic episode, and believe me, there's trauma, because Yuyuko does not fight fair. Yuyuko has what is easily the most infuriating move in the entire game, a heat-seeking cluster of serpentine lasers that collect and intertwine to propel dozens of additional projectiles in a radius around it, and this thing chases you, all while she stuffs you out of the sky with downright obnoxiously large magic orbs. But once you're through the worst of it, the finish line is in sight. Yuyuko seems to lose a bit of steam, as none of her previous efforts have borne fruit. You get her to her last health bar, and she goes down easily. Too easily. When the fanfare and showering spectacle of particles doesn't fall, as it had with every other defeated boss, you realize something isn't quite right. The music takes a sudden twist, and Yuyuko's final form is revealed. The elegance her attacks had previously held has now vanished entirely, the bullet patterns losing any semblance of grace or fairness. Her hatred is raw and unfettered, and she is willing to do whatever it takes to kill you. She has become completely intangible, seen as though she's a ghost. And now, you're without an opponent to strike, and only a gauntlet of hellfire to narrowly weave your way through in a test of survival. If you're able to hold on long enough, Yuyuko will dissipate without leaving any trace she was ever there at all. You're showered with rewards as a wave of relief washes over you, and soon, the fanfare of your triumph fades and the credits finally roll. So I think that pretty much sums up the events of the game. I'll just share a few closing thoughts before... Oh, that's probably my mom. Hold on. Hello? Wait, what? Secret 7th stage? Hidden bosses? True ending? I don't... What the fuck? So... There's a secret 7th stage which you can only get to by clearing the entire game without continuing once. I played this game like a fucking slave in the hopes of even gracing the 7th stage and meeting the secret boss, let alone beating them. Getting to Yuyuko without continuing was already hard enough, especially when you're stubborn like me and refuse to play on a difficulty lower than hard when Touhou is already infamous for its ludicrous difficulty. I would continually find myself making slight errors, overestimating my own movement as I tried to blitz through the battles I'd already fought thousands of times over. I have invested more time in this game than I have in Skyrim across all of its iterations over the years. I fucking played this game, okay? And you know what? I've got some shit to say about the secret ending, because not only is there a hidden 7th stage that's nearly impossible to reach, but there's an 8th stage after that. The problem doesn't stem from there being 2 additional levels. No. It's the fact that both of the extra levels are identical. On stage 7, you fight Shen Yakumo, the boss of the second stage, as the mid-level boss, later moving on to fight Ran Yakumo. But once you make it to the 8th and final stage in the game, you'll notice exactly what I'm talking about. The enemies that spawn are the same, using the same attacks and patterns as they did in the previous level. Even the stage music is the same. The Phantasm stage mid-boss recycles the exact attack patterns of the stage 7 mid-boss. And then we get to the final boss of the game, and they have a nearly identical fight to Ran's from the end of stage 7. It doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't want to play the same level twice in a row. That's not fun. That's not how you reward the effort it took to get here. If Zune was taking a creative direction to suggest that maybe the Netherworld was bending in ways we couldn't comprehend due to Yukari's influence, there's still no excuse to rehash the same gameplay. I understand that you could argue the associated characters and their abilities could be referencing how comparable they are in strength, but even if that's the case, they shouldn't be carbon copies of each other. It would have actually been really fucking cool to see Ran use one of Yukari's moves and vice versa alongside their own techniques, but instead they are literally just the same fucking fights, with exception to very, very minor differences. It's for these reasons that the design of the extra stages falls short when compared to the rest of the game, as the careful thought that went into piecing together the awe-inspiring boss fights that make Touhou so memorable were thrown out the window completely along with the rest of Zune's creativity. When I look back on these stages, they leave a retrospective bad taste in my mouth as a result of feeling rushed and unfinished. Without question, the secret ending of Touhou 7 would have been significantly better if there had only been one extra stage, which gave its characters personality and identity to differentiate them from their counterparts. However, while Zune's design philosophy for the post-game content is pretty questionable, I've still got a video to finish and a story to tell. So, enough complaining about the shortcomings. Here's what the final phantasm of Perfect Cherry Blossom could have been. Without a moment of hesitation, the atmosphere of the phantasm hits you like a freight train on fire. Charming domination begins to play, and the frenzying frantic tempo ensures the pacing of tension never misses a beat. This song is sonically orgasmic and communicates an air of life or death to the player, because now it is truly do or die. You've fought and struggled so fucking desperately to make it to this point, you can't afford to let this opportunity slip through your fingers, because for all you know this is the only chance you're getting. Soaring through the upper echelons of the furthest reaches of the Netherrealm, blasting forlorn spirits out of the sky with volley after volley of daggers by the dozen, all in pursuit of the most powerful yokai known to exist, Yukari fucking Yakumo. The enemies of this place aren't pushovers, easily being the most powerful we've yet to face. Here in the heart of the underworld, we're facing off against the best of the best, and only the most powerful of yokai as we press even deeper into the heart of this world. But even the task of meeting Yukari isn't simple, as her devoted servant Ran happens upon us first. She blocks our ascent to the border of Gensokyo, and now we find ourselves facing off against the nine-tailed Kitsune Shikigami. Unworthy of being called a mini-boss, Ran is a stage boss before the stage boss. Ran's power puts each opponent we've fought thus far to shame, and her theme is evidence of this. Her wide array of sweeping strikes and piercing projectiles keep you fleet of foot or dead where you stand. Tightly knit intersecting patterns leave little to no breathing room and zero capacity for mistakes. You'll find no mercy here. Ran's first spell card is a barrage of fast-moving bullets from either side as she weaves countless slower projectiles throughout the rest of the battlefield. Much like the Bakeneko Shikigami she is master to, she aims to push you into panicking and making slight mistakes you simply cannot afford. The pressure of her attacks combined with the weight of risking the chance you've been struggling for can shatter the nerves of even the most seasoned players. She switches up her strategy with the next spell card, calling upon her superior agility to run circles around you while flushing you out with wave after wave of bullet spreads in every direction, backing you into a corner and making you completely vulnerable. From there, Ran really starts to dial up the intensity, overwhelming the player with a diamond-shaped Danmaku Labyrinth, which closely resembles one of her master's spell cards. After that fails, she'll begin spacing you out with countless waves of daggers, biding her time to formulate a plan to take you down. Her next spell card, Banquet of 12 General Gods, draws you toward the middle of the screen and then unleashes a barraging bullet storm from every direction. If you're able to outlast the curtaining fire, she'll only up the ante afterward with her charming siege from all sides. Dozens of constant projectile streams overlap with one another as she bombards you with a gauntlet of fireballs. Ran's reimagined encounter draws from her own abilities as well as the techniques her and Yukari share. But once her charming siege fails, she'll change up her tactics yet again after realizing she won't be able to defeat you through sheer brute force, instead opting to control the ebb and flow of battle. Her unilateral shot spell card suddenly conjures forth strings of projectiles and begins to bend the trajectory of the swarming bullets around you. She'll also vanish from sight during the cast, avoiding damage. Best her again, and she'll resort to the last ace in her sleeve, her own servant, Shen Yakumo, calling upon the aid of her understudy to provide supporting fire as she flashes through the skies. Shen's nimble movements have an active hurtbox which effectively turn her into a projectile herself. Defeat them both, and you're one step closer to the end of your journey. After fighting our way through even more hordes of yokai, we're met with a calm stillness. Everything is quiet until the moment she finally appears, lying in wait like a spider in its web, the manipulator of ethereal boundaries, Yukari Yakumo, the most powerful yokai of them all. This evil, two-faced bitch is by far the most sinister character we've encountered yet, having restricted the freedom over her devoted servant Ran Yakumo by turning her into a pawn to further her own selfish desires. Before her first spell card, she leads with waves of whirlwind daggers thrown in every direction. She quickly summons huge arcane explosions which spawn swarms of bullets in their wake, some of which home in on the player while others flood the open space and push you onto the back foot. She then switches back to her opening gambit with a whirlwind of daggers even more tempestuous than the last, strangling the player of any quarter the transition might have afforded them. She then begins to spawn continuous streams of bullets in spiraling patterns all across the field as she bombards you with huge glowing orbs amidst the chaos. After yet another flurry of daggers, her true colors are finally put on display. She manipulates the playing field, cutting off the majority of your freedom to maneuver around her attacks with layers upon layers of intertwining lasers in a pattern much resembling a spider's web. She launches enormous spreads of bullets at high speeds all across the stage. This attack is cruel and unforgiving, and is completely devoid of grace or fairness. Yukari is solely aiming to defeat you by whatever means necessary, even if it means revealing her hand. Yukari forces you into a corner and bombards you time and time again, pressing you further into disadvantage and sending icy fire through every nerve in your body. With your back against the wall, there's nothing standing between you and the afterlife. You're already here. Now hold fast to whatever you have left, because the worst is far from over. After Yukari's first web fails, her next spell card sends forth wave-like streams of intersecting bullets alongside spread shots of fireballs. And if that wasn't enough, she'll start blasting you with lasers too, just to keep you where she wants you. Yukari's manipulative tactics are given the spotlight, and we the player are left reeling from her distortion. After yet another storm of knives, Yukari begins to control the tide of battle much more directly, with multi-directional lasers cutting off huge regions of the sky, clusters of projectiles, fireballs, and several layers of AoE bullet spreads. Yukari is desperate to trip us up in her web of distortion by any means. Yukari's next spell card is a spinning swastika made of lasers. Well, actually it's two of them. Yep, that's really in the game. And the second one is even bigger. The rotation and speed of the spinning hate lasers will switch up depending on the color, so even while avoiding them, you have to remain vigilant because the laser you're running from could reappear right in front of you at any given moment. Yukari then continues to throw knives everywhere, altering the approaching patterns with every transition between spell cards. Once Yukari's next spell card activates, we begin to better understand just what her powers might entail. She scatters a sudden surge of bullets all across the sky, and then redirects the pattern in on itself as she conjures another. Her ability of manipulation can transcend space itself. After further revealing what her power is capable of, she calls upon her servant for help. Ran takes to the skies, dashing from one side of the battlefield to the next in a single bound. Swarms of projectiles radiate from every endpoint of Ran's movement, and the combined power of Yukari's projectiles keep the player on the back foot. When their combined efforts prove fruitless, Yukari resorts to the true essence of her power, border manipulation. She disappears completely and envelops the player in a ring of fire as steady streams of bullets rain down from all around them. The projectiles come faster and faster, in greater numbers, as the ring you're trapped in begins to close, asphyxiating you of any chance to dodge her attacks. Luckily, As the border tightens, there's just barely enough room to graze by the bullets, and we can still use our own bombs for valuable invincibility frames. After narrowly avoiding certain death, the Fibonacci sequence of Hellfire Agony begins. Yukari's spell card starts slowly, only a spiraling pattern of pellets around her, but it doesn't stay simple and clean like that. She begins to throw in more spiraling bullets, and then soon after spiraling fireballs, and then before you know it, you're dodging even more spiraling bullets, the glowing yellow balls of magic, and then blue ones too. She absolutely floods the screen, again barely leaving enough room for her spell card to even be possible to evade. Yukari's final gambit is the ultimate manipulation of bullets, spawning barriers and active hurt boxes to propel forward at her command. She once more becomes completely intangible, and you're left only to dodge the incoming attack. The first wave is short and easy, only having a few layers and plenty of room between, but the spiraling waves of inverted momentum and chaotic action can make you second-guess yourself and narrowly miss the safe zones of her assault. The third wave pushes you against the wall and makes you brace for death, narrowly clinging to life as the bullets graze you. After nothing else has put a stop to you, Yukari gives up, but not before one last all-out attack. She conjures layers upon layers of rings of bullets all around you, ensnaring you in her web one final time. Once again, your life flashes before your very eyes, and with one last evasive maneuver, it's all over. Touhou 7 is riddled with developmental oversights and shortcomings, but there is no such thing as a perfect work of art, and there never will be. Even despite the flaws of Perfect Cherry Blossom, I fucking adore this game. The soundtrack is utterly phenomenal, easily the best in the series, and there is a lot of good Touhou music. The characters were fun and memorable, able to communicate messages to the player through nothing more than patterns of bullets on a screen. I can sing praises about this game until the day I die and hardly repeat myself. The symbolic weight and theming of stages and spell cards are testament to Zun's genius, not only as a game designer, but musician too. I opened this video essay stating that Touhou 7 is the best rhythm game I've ever played, and this isn't even a rhythm game. In playing this game so much, practicing run after run trying to get to Yukari, the brilliant compositions of the soundtrack were what fueled my drive to continue. As I became more and more proficient at evading spell cards as I familiarized myself with them, I would get entire boss fights down to a near science, a rhythm. I knew on what beat of the song to dodge, in what direction to do so, on what note the spell card would end, or when the boss would die. I didn't have time to glance up at their health bar while narrowly clinging to my lives. I gauged the battle through musical measure, and in turn, I enjoyed what was easily the most satisfying rhythm-based gaming experience I will ever have. This game is an absolute masterpiece, and no one can ever take that away from Zun. But no masterpiece is necessarily perfect. I give Touhou 7 Imperfect Cherry Blossom a stage 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching.